Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. I've done a few of these videos, but it's always pretty popular, so I thought I'd do another one today. And that's to do three different unique ring shanks. And I find that it's nice to create lots of different kinds of shanks because you see a lot of the same thing over and over again at different places. And so it's nice to come up with truly unique stuff. So these three are pretty basic, but there are lots of modifications possible. So if you come up with some great ideas, I'd love to hear what you come up with. So here's three different ring shanks that I drew up today. Before we get into that, though, I'd like to thank some people. First, I'd like to thank my patrons over on Patreon, and I have a new one, Rigger Crafts. Thank you for signing up. I really appreciate the support, and I appreciate the support of all my other previous patrons as well. I think Rigger Crafts that you'll find that it's a nice group of people with a whole lot of knowledge, so join in to the conversation over there and have fun. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 24,400, I believe. That's amazing. I can't believe I have that many followers on YouTube, but thank you. And thank you for the really nice comments. I get some of the most touching things that people tell me about how I've helped them in situations and in ways that I never would have expected. So thank you for that. That's nice to know that I'm helping people. I do really appreciate the financial support, the buy me a coffees, the super thanks, when people buy my merch or get my ebooks. That stuff all makes my channel sustainable, so I continue to do this. And I do appreciate that a lot, so thank you for that. All right, well, let's get started on these three different ring shank types. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks that you can get on my merch store. This particular model has a gauged inches to millimeters chart, which I find pretty useful. Some of the other ones have different charts on them, or silversmithing related information, so check those out, they're nice. The real feature that I like is having kind of a journal of what I've made, and it has this nice dot matrix in the background that helps. It's kind of subtle on camera, but it's like graph paper except not so obtrusive, and it helps me to draw better projects, I think, because I don't freehand draw very well, and so it helps to have some little guidance, you know, to keep things a little symmetrical. But okay, so like I said, I've done a few of these videos. If you want to see one of the other ones, I'll put a link up here. I think it's nice to change out the shanks and rings, and so you don't just do all the same thing. For a long time I had like three basic types that I did, and that was kind of boring after a while, so I tried to start doing different stuff. And I've never made any of these exactly, I don't believe, so we'll try this. This one's kind of zigzaggy, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to put a little circle in a little crook where it's zagging. This one, I think, is kind of straightforward. A lot of times I'll do just two wires soldered together to create a simple little band. I was going to do four this time and do some variations here. And again, you could configure these in a lot of ways, probably the way they attach to the bezel, but I'm going to do something like that, I think. I like it. It looks kind of sleek and neat. This one is sort of modern and angular. This one looks to me a little like Bauhaus-ish or something. I'm not sure. But on this one, it's going to be square wire. I'm using round wire on these ones, I think. And then it's a little bit thicker square wire. This is 14 gauge, which is 1.6 millimeters. This is going to be 10 gauge that I flattened out a piece and I curved it. So I thought I could cut two sections out of there to create these sides over here to go around the bezel. 10 gauge is 2.6 millimeters, I think, when it starts, but I've flattened it out quite a bit for this project. These are both going to be 16 gauge for the most part, with which is 1.3 millimeters, and 18 gauge for these little rings here, which is 1 millimeter. The bezel I'm using is 3/16 fine silver bezel strip in 26 gauge. That's 4.76 by 0.41 millimeters. It's tall bezel, so we'll probably file it down a bit because it doesn't need to be that tall for these stones. And these are, I did make the bezels in advance so we could focus on the bands here because we're doing three projects here. Okay, so there's the bezels. And I picked out these. I bought a little batch of Persian turquoise last time I was at a show. I thought these were kind of pretty. Three different types from the same batch. So we'll make each ring a different turquoise ring. So I think those will be fun. But let's start with the top one here. We'll call this one number 1. We'll call this angular. We'll call this one sleek, maybe. We'll call this one Bauhaus. It kind of looks like a stylized bow tie. We call it a bow tie setting. We'll see if they even turn out looking cool or not. But let's come up with a size we're going to make it. So if we're trying to shoot for a size right off the bat, I'd almost say it'd be easier just to make them a little bit on the big side and then cut them down after you have them all put together to the size you want. And that's what I usually do when I'm teaching a class and we're coming up with some ring designs. It's easier than if I'm trying to help 4 or 5 different people to make similar settings but not exactly the same and get them all the right size. It's easier just to have them cut them big and then size them down at the end. So the things to think about here. This stone here is going to be a direct part of the band that goes all the way around the finger. So we can kind of incorporate that into the size of the piece we need to cut. Now, and it's not in a straight line, so it's going to actually have to be a little bit longer. So we're going to subtract this from the length once we measure for the size we're going to do. And then add in a little bit extra to make up for the little zigzags we're doing there, if that makes sense. So this one needs to be this subtracted and a little bit added for the zigzags probably, so we'll get it pretty close. This one we could just go, since these are almost touching up here in the middle, if we go with the longest point being just about the actual size, that'll give us a little room for fudging and we can just file them down. So in this one I'm going to measure from here all the way around to here, and whatever the sizes I'm trying to shoot for, we're going to cut it for exactly that size. This one we have to deduct this, add a little bit on. This one, it's only going up to here really, and then we're going to solder on these other pieces, and then we'll probably solder the whole thing to the bezel. And so really we're going to be subtracting from here to here from the overall length we're trying to shoot for. So if we measure for an 8, we're going to deduct this from the overall length after we mark it for an 8. So I will show you what I mean. Let's make these. Let's make them about 8.5 this time. So I always add a little bit extra if I'm trying to measure for the size for filing purposes. So I'll continue to do that even though we're going to size it down for this a little bit. So that was an 8.5, I think, right? So now if I take this bezel here, we'll subtract that from it because that's going to become part of the overall length of the band. But then we want to add in a little bit extra because we're going to take a little length out by angling these. So if we got to there, and then we'll add in maybe, I don't know, let's add it about that much. And see how it works, So right here is ring number 1. Right. This one, since it almost meets at this endpoint, let's just measure right to the size, which is here. So this is number 2. And then this one we have to deduct that much. So this is number 3. When we measure for our pieces of wire. So let me get this round wire out of the pickle, I had to pull some from some 14 gauge through my draw plate. So that's one nice thing about having a draw plate or two. When you run out of a particular size of wire, you can just take some thicker wire and make it into smaller wire. So I'm going to spend a few moments getting this kind of straightened up a little bit. And actually I'm going to cut a chunk off because it's a little cumbersome having this. I was pickling this because after I pulled it through the draw plate, I annealed it so it was soft again. If you're new to this, annealing is if you heat the metal up kind of to a high temperature where it gets kind of a little reddish glow to it, and then let it cool off, and then when it's almost cool, then go ahead and quench it in some water. What that does is that makes it softer and more malleable. And the more you work it, whether it's twisting it or pounding it or stretching it, or in the case of what I was doing, which was pulling it through successively smaller holes, which really puts a lot of stress on the wire itself, causes it to become stiffer and more springy. It's called work hardening. So annealing gets rid of that. But when you heat it up, it oxidizes, so I threw it in the pickle for a while. Let's go ahead and measure for number 1. This is number 1 up to this line here. It'll be interesting to see how accurate my measurements turn out to be. Sometimes you have a good measuring day, and sometimes you don't have a good measuring day. Alright, so I got to figure out how to make these little zigzags happen. And I think I might solder these all the way to the end. Cut like a notch with the saw so I can bend it sharply and then resolder it to get nice even bends. So let's do that for this one. I hadn't really thought through how I was going to do that yet, but I think that's probably an easy way to do it. So. I find when I'm straightening wire, and somebody always tells me you can roll it between 2 bench blocks or, highly polished pieces of wood or things like that. I kind of like straightening wire like this. And a lot of times when people try to do it like this, they're using the pliers to kind of bend it. But I use the pliers just to kind of hold it where I want it to be held. Like if I need to make a sharp bend in this spot because it's out of whack there, if I just hold it with the pliers and use my fingers to gently bend it, I get a better result. That looks good enough to me for that one. So I'm going to set those to the side. Should we go ahead and make all 3? I think we might as well. Alright, for number 2, let's cut this end off. Okay, and let's cut some of these out of a 14 gauge square. This 14? So 3. I'm going to cut them just a little bit longer just to make sure. Because I always tend to add a little extra rather than try and get it right on the nose, because Sometimes you don't measure right, you know. Okay, I'm going to straighten these two, and then I'll be right back. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder, which melts at about 1450 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll put the centigrade equivalent up there for you. I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a dropper bottle. I used to spray it on with a spray bottle, but I prefer it this way, I think. My torch is a Silversmith model. It's their acetylene air torch. It pulls in atmospheric air to mix with the gas here and produces about 4,500 degrees. It's not as hot as an oxyacetylene because it's not pumping pure oxygen into the flame, but it's hotter than a propane or a butane torch. So it's a nice torch for silversmithing, I think. The reason I used round wire for this one is I thought the zigzag would be more pronounced if we did it this way. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's kind of what my instinct told me. No. Okay, let's figure out well, first of all, let's make sure the ends are nice and flat. Alright, so now we got to think about where we're going to make those little notches. Somewhere. I have a marker. Put something far off. It looks like this one needs to go in from the other side, I think, right? Yes. So we're going to go cut a little V out going this way, and a little V out going this way. Let's see if we can get this to cut started there. I may deepen that with the file, we'll see. Okay, I'm going to go clean that up. Let's try and bend them together now. Like that. Okay, I'm going to go cut those out now. And we'll see. Let's see if we got it symmetrical or not. We're even relatively symmetrical. Let's solder those together. Let's see. This is called pick soldering. You'll pick up a little bit on the end of your pick. If you're interested in learning how to do that, I have a good video up there. It's one of those skills that kind of really amped up what I could do. Trying to visualize. Just going to put a little ring in here too. Do that about how big I want it to be. Let me see if I got a little 18 gauge round laying around. Let's do one of these on this little veil making pliers. Do a couple about that size. See how they look. So I'm going to bend this around the ring manual. Now, what I really need to do is I need to file these this way, and so I'll be doing, probably going to use my rotary tool to do this, but if I can find my little file there. This needs to go kind of like that angle, and this needs to go like that. Okay, I have the band shape for this first one, and filed to the where it touches, and then I added a little medium paste solder. And actually, the way I've got this sitting, neither the band nor the bezel can fall out, so I probably could just use hard solder and pick it in there. But I know a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. This is one of those sort of situations where you have kind of a big stone on a small band, and so having one of these ring mandrels that have a little flat side on them is kind of useful if you want to do a little fine tuning on the shape. Let's do the next one. So these ones are going to, the two outer ones are going to extend further out than the middle ones, and so I think let's take one of these. Let's kind of use this as a gauge. So really about there is where I'd want it to bend outwards. Just run that straight across. If we want it the same on the other side, we should be able to flop that around. Do that one. Just a skosh. If you're using a smaller torch and you're having trouble getting the entire piece up to temperature, see I'm going at it from along the lengthwise this way, then the excess heat bleeds off over here. If you're doing it like this, the excess heat is being wasted, so you'll have an easier time getting it up to temperature if you're using one of those butane torches or a plumber's propane torch or something. I should be able to use my rounded part of my Patron file. Probably not perfect, but you know, nothing's ever really perfect. So now we need to bend these outwards. Looks like I may need to bend them a little closer towards the inside of the mark. I think that's pretty good, so let's solder that together. One of the things I was kind of keeping an eye on is I wanted the solder to progress partway up the side, but not, you know, and pretty consistently on all four of these, and it did. So I think we're pretty good there. Okay, so here's what I think I'm going to do next. This needs to fit in there. And those need to be, just like on the last one, they need to be more vertically sided, the ends of these wires, so that they match up a bit better. These other ones, I think, since we're going to curve them in, we can just kind of butt them up against. But let me get these filed up nicely. I think I'm going to go ahead and solder this. I think it's relatively straight, and I have all 8 points touching, so I need to get it put together. get that pickled and we'll get to work on the third one. Alright, for this last one, I just think I made an executive decision off camera. I want these two to be parallel, and 14 gauge is thin enough to where after it's all soldered together it could still flop around. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a spacer in the middle at the bottom of the band. I might use a piece of this stuff that I'm going to use for the curved part as well. Let's see if I can find the center of this. Probably good enough, I think. So for the second piece here, I think I'm just going to put a spot where the curve matches pretty well. A scratch there. It's pretty close to the same size. Alright, for this one now, I want these to solder onto here nicely. So I'm going to curve the ends just slightly inwards, and then we'll solder those on. Okay, now I'm going to prepare this the same way I did before, bending it around the mandrel, and then I'm going to file these so they're more vertical and they fit next to the bezel better. So I'll be right back. Okay, on this one I used a little bit of medium paste solder along the edges here. I just need to get that to flow and then we'll be good. Alright, I'll get that cleaned up and we'll see you at the end. And you'll have to let me know in the comments which one you like, if any of these. So I'm always curious to hear what people think. So I got everything all set and polished, and we'll take a look at all of these rings. So here's the first one. I think that came out pretty much how I was expecting. I like it. Okay, so that's the angular one. Second one we did was a sleek one. And this one's kind of nice. It looks less sleek when it's rounded. I had it kind of like stretched out here. I guess I could have done the insides or the outsides a little bit narrower maybe. It doesn't look exactly like what I was making or what I drew, but I do like it though. Don't get me wrong, I kind of think it came out nice. And then we got the kind of Bauhausy looking one. So I think that was a good addition, adding a little spacer. Keeps everything all kind of parallel. Okay, well you tell me which one you like, the angular, the sleek, or the Bauhausy kind of one. Let me know what you think. Or tell me you hate them all. It's fine, whatever. Okay, well that was 3 different ring shanks to try. Like I said earlier, I think there's a lot of modifications you could make to create all sorts of variations. If you enjoyed this, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button. That really helps to get my channel promoted, and I do appreciate that a lot. I'd also love it if you'd take a moment and head over to my main YouTube channel page. I've been doing this for about 3.5 years now, so I have accumulated quite a bit of content over there. And I think there's almost certainly something else you'll find interesting or useful. So check out some of my videos over there. And make sure to subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber as well. Finally, for information about the video itself, as well as some important links, hit the video description down below. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about the various tiers of that. There's multiple tiers, the lowest one being just getting rid of the YouTube advertisements, which is kind of nice. And then there's some other tiers above that that have some other features, like we do a live stream. I'm doing a live stream this weekend, I think. And sometimes we do some Patreon exclusive videos. But check them out. It's a nice group of people, and there's a lot of information sharing going on over there, which I appreciate. There's a link to my merch store as well, if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks I talked about at the beginning. I find those to be super handy. There's also some other merch there as well. And finally, there's a link to my latest ebook, which is a guide to 2024's tutorials. So there's a page for each of the tutorials that I did last year. And on each page there is a picture of the sketch that I drew, a picture of the final outcome, a list of materials that you need to make the project, a difficulty rating, and some notes that I made about the project after the fact, thinking about would I have done things differently, or did I learn something useful out of this one, or is there a variation I might have done if I had done it again? All sorts of information like that. Did I like the outcome or not? I usually try to be pretty honest about that. I don't always like the things that I make. But it's a nice way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a great way to support my channel. So thanks in advance if you do that. All right, well, take care. Happy silversmithing.